May the words of my mouth, the meditations of our hearts be acceptable in your sight, O Lord, our strength and our Redeemer. Amen. So this coming week, this Wednesday actually, marks a little bit of a milestone in my house. My daughter, Grace, will have a birthday, and she will begin her 20th year on the earth. And so I've been thinking about her, and about how did that happen, and I've been thinking about the experiences that she's been having lately, and I've been thinking about this gospel. So I think a lot of you know actually that my daughter Grace has been living in India and going to school over there. And she's come back a couple times. She came back over the summer. And as you can imagine, I know a bit of you, or many of you have experienced this probably, but that traveling around the world as an American and then coming home, that can raise questions about the fairness of life. And so she's been wrestling with these questions, like why do we find ourselves kind of born into the life that we have? Whether it's a life of privilege or a life of poverty or whatever, how do we end up here in these shoes? Why is it that some other people in the world seem to innately have just more than us, and others kind of seem to innately have less? And so she's been wrestling with these questions, and one of the things that she's verbalized is this thing, she worked really hard to get into that school. It's a top-notch school. And then she's like, but Dad, some of those kids didn't work at all to get in. It's like they just got in, or their parents got them in. How's that fair? But regardless, she's in. And she's in there with these kids, from all over the world. I think 60 different countries are represented, and all different socioeconomic levels, all different backgrounds. It goes from royalty, legit royalty, to kids who have just a lot less. Part of that is just the power and the exchange rate of the U.S. dollar, right? The dollar's worth more. She had this experience where she was with some of her friends, and they kind of got stranded in Mumbai. And they're like, what are we going to do? Where are we going to stay? And they're going around to hotels, do we have enough rupees to stay? And she does the math, and she's like, it's between $20 and $30. She's like, I can do this. And then she feels guilty. Why do I have that? And I imagine probably, a lot of you can relate. A lot of you have traveled. A lot of you know. A lot of you have probably wrestled with these same things. There can be some guilt. There definitely is questioning about the fairness. And, probably many parents, I probably imagine my parents probably told me one time, life is not fair. I probably told that to my kids. And so somehow this is sort of an age-old problem that Jesus is addressing in this gospel today. What is fair? Why is life so seemingly unfair? And when we look at the world around us, And when we think of ourselves as Christians, it's like our question becomes, how is our God a just and fair God in this world? And so around these questions, it's to explain this, Jesus does what he so often does. He kind of breaks into parable. And he says, it's like the kingdom of heaven, where there's a landowner. And Jesus, he talks about what it would be like, what it will be like, hopefully, and what it could be like now if we would accept God as king and we would accept God's kingdom. And this parable, it tells of this kind of kingdom, this kingdom of heaven that is so fair that it just blows our minds. It doesn't even make sense. It does not add up. And we can't get our heads around it. This parable, it tells us that some of us are actually going to grumble about the fairness in the kingdom. And I think Jesus tells this parable, so just maybe we can get beyond our notions, our earthly notions of what it is to be fair, what is unfair, what is deserving, what is undeserving. And Jesus wants to show us this glimpse of heaven where we stop doing the math, that equation, right? Where hard work and knowledge and power, that adds up to success and wealth and status, right? He wants us to stop doing that math and kind of realize that we are all God's beloved, even if we're a slacker. This is good news to the poor, where the first shall be last and the last shall be first. This is good news where the heights of the hills are brought down and the valleys raised up, and we are equal in God's eyes. Jesus wants us to metanoia, to go beyond our minds, go beyond kind of that stinking thinking and realize the limitless generosity, the limitless grace, and the limitless goodness of God. And this just does not make sense to those of us who kind of were brought up thinking the early bird gets the worm, right? Last Sunday, if you remember, in the gospel, we heard about how God's forgiveness is beyond imagination. And this week we hear how God's fairness is beyond our imagination. God's fairness is not our earthbound fairness. God's math is not our math. To the prophet Isaiah, God says, "My ways are not your ways, nor my thoughts your thoughts. And just as the heavens are higher than the earth, so are my ways than your ways, and my thoughts than your thoughts." One of the key points I think this parable makes today is it's interesting. If you go back and you read it, you see where the landowner goes out to the marketplace and he calls people into the vineyard. And so this makes a real interesting and important distinction, I think, where the work in the vineyard is very different than the work in the marketplace. The work in the vineyard and the outcomes in the vineyard and the fairness in the vineyard seem foolish to people who are used to trading in the marketplace and doing business as usual in that kind of marketplace economy where time equals money. The marketplace is that place where people are like in survival mode. where people try to get ahead of others and compete with their neighbors. The marketplace is that place where people are like providing for me and my family. But the work in the vineyard is where there is fruit for everyone, work for everyone, enough for everyone, where everybody is fed the same in the end. And the paycheck in the vineyard, that is not what matters. And this vineyard, it doesn't make sense to the marketplace economy, the marketplace mentality. I mean, like, think about the foolishness of what people do in the vineyard, right? I mean, like, why on earth would people pay a lot of money for airfare and travel and lodging to go over and serve the people in Ghana or Haiti, when instead they could be going to, like, Aruba for vacation, right? Why would people just kind of like give their hard-earned money away to the church? Why would people give their money away to the food bank, Feed and See? Or why would people give money, to women who are in a bad situation and need to get out? Home Hope of Mooresville. Why would people give money to Mooresville Christian Mission, where they're just going to take that money and pay the bills of the poor who have gotten behind? I mean, I know I'm preaching to the choir, right? But there are a lot of people in this world, in the marketplace. And fair is a very different thing. In the vineyard, it's all about generosity. Landowner says, "Are you just jealous because I'm generous?" And that generosity, it takes us beyond the economics of the marketplace and shifts us into doing the work in the vineyard. And doing what doesn't make sense to the head, to the bottom line, but it does make sense to the heart. And in doing this, it helps us be a little more like the landowner in this parable. The work and the vineyard is where all of God's children have enough to flourish. And I mean homes, I mean clean water, I mean education, shoes, access to medical care. In the vineyard, it's where all of God's children come alive, regardless of whether we think they deserve it or not.